Some people do amazing things. Today, we hang out with a man who not only traveled from the coast of Antarctica to the South Pole, but did it on a bike. Daniel Burton is a former computer programmer turned biker enthusiast from Utah, USA. In 2013 through 2014, Daniel rode solo for over 750 miles and 51 days to achieve this accomplishment. Let's ask him how he did it and take a peek into the mindset of one badass dude. Like badass skills and tactics? Subscribe and hit the bell. Hey Daniel, thanks for joining us and giving me the opportunity to ask you some questions about your experience.
Thanks, Michael. It's such a privilege for me to be able to share this experience with you. And so yeah, thank you.
Could you give us a little background of who you are?
Really, I'm just kind of an ordinary guy. In fact, maybe a little bit less than ordinary. I was pretty good at programming computers, so I was doing that. But the problem is, as a computer programmer, I was spending a lot of time sitting at a desk and not being as active as I should have been. And so I got a little bit overweight, and my cholesterol numbers were really bad. My blood pressure numbers were bad. I was lucky to be working with some guys that were into mountain biking, so I started going mountain biking with them, and that lost the extra weight, and my cholesterol numbers went to normal, and my blood pressure went to normal. So in a lot of ways, I felt biking saved my life.
So how did biking to the South Pole become a thing for you?
Eventually, I got laid off, and when I got laid off, I decided I wanted to do something to try to give other people the benefits that I had gotten from biking. And so I opened up a bike shop and worked on getting people out on a bike to be more active. After I'd been running the bike store for a while, I started finding out about these bikes they called fat bikes. And at first, it wasn't something I was really interested in. I didn't see much of a market for it in my area. But then one year I had a bunch of people ask me about these fat bikes, and so I thought, well, maybe I should look into it. So I got a Surly Moonlander. It was the fattest tires you could get at the time. I think it's still probably about as fat as the tires you can get. It's 5-inch wide tires. And I got a couple frames and built up some bikes, and we took these bikes and we rode them across Utah Lake. It was frozen at the time. And so we rode across Utah Lake and had a lot of fun doing that and enjoying riding them in the snow. That was when I learned about a guy named Eric Larson. Eric Larson decided that he would ride a bike to the South Pole. I started following his expedition, and he made it about a quarter of the way to the South Pole, and then he turned around and went back. He decided that that was the best thing for him to do. After he did that, I had a guy that kept coming into my bike store, and he kept saying that when he won the lottery, he was going to take that lottery winnings, and he and I were going to bike to the South Pole. And at first, when he started telling me this, I thought, there's no way I'm going to be doing that. And it kind of sunk into me, and it became an obsession with me, something I just had to do. So it started out as something I wasn't going to do, but it was something that I just couldn't resist doing.
Were there any restrictions or legal concerns about traveling through Antarctica?
Antarctica is actually not owned by any nation, and so it's governed by a treaty, and there's some rules, and I had to notify the government that I was going there, but really there wasn't a lot of government issues with doing that.
What was one of the big issues you had before even getting off the ground?
My wife was like, if you're going to go do this, you need to have some life insurance so that if you do die doing this, I can pay off the loans that we've got for the bike store and for doing the expedition. You go and talk to life insurance companies about getting life insurance, and they have a set of questions they ask you. And one of the questions they'd ask was, are you leaving the country in the next 6 months? And my answer was yes. And it's like, what country are you going to? And it's like, it's not a country. It's like, well, where are you going? And it's like, Antarctica. And I said, denied. And so eventually I had to find an insurance that was a higher premium, and it was, you give us money and we insure you and we don't ask any questions.
How did you actually get down there? Logistically, how was this accomplished?
There's a company called Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions, ALE. If you're going to do an expedition in Antarctica, then they are the company you go through. And so I got set up with them. I shipped up my bike and all the gear I needed down to Chile, and then I flew down to Chile, and then they took us in a Russian military cargo plane from Chile down to Union Glacier in Antarctica. So I landed at Union Glacier, and then from Union Glacier, they would fly me to my starting point at Hercules Inlet, which is a bay just off the coast of Antarctica. And so I actually started on the ocean, frozen ice shelf there. So they dropped me off there, and then I had 3 food supplies, and they would fly into the locations that we had determined along the way and dig a hole in the ice, put my food cache in it, and then they'd bury it, put a flag on it, give me the GPS coordinates and say, go play geocaching for life.
So how did you afford it?
as you can imagine, is not a cheap thing to do. I had been running the bike shop for about 6 years, and so I hadn't had any income during that time. When I was a computer programmer, I was making good money. I had been out of debt and had enough money to get my bike store started. But with the bike store, I spent all of that money, and I ended up getting a loan against my house, and every year I was getting further and further in debt with the bike store. And so I was pretty much broke when I decided to do this. And so my original idea was to crowdfund it. It was kind of one of the scariest moments of my life. At this point, I was so into it. I just had to do this and had no money to do it and everything. And so the hardest thing I probably ever have done, well, other than biking to the South Pole, the hardest thing I've ever done is I had to go to my wife and say, look, I really want to do this. And the only way we can do it is I'm going to take a loan out against my house. And I was surprised she actually let me do it. It actually went a lot better than you would expect. And so I went to the bank and asked them for a loan to be able to pay for this. One of the things they ask is, how much money do you make? I got my local credit union. I got them to go ahead and approve a loan for my expedition. So I got a loan against my house for the expedition, and that was pretty much how I paid for it.
Broke, borrowing money, putting up your house. Were you able to work out any sponsorships?
Could actually get companies to sponsor me with equipment. Nobody wanted to give me money, but I could get equipment. I had a fair number of good sponsors. I don't think I'll go through all of them, but the bike was provided for me by Borealis.
Cool. Tell me about the bike.
My bike was a Borealis Yampa fat bike, so 5-inch wide tires, a carbon fiber frame, and really, when I was looking for bikes, fat bikes, they were just starting to take off. That wasn't a big thing yet, and so there weren't a lot of companies doing fat bikes. But Borealis just started doing it before my expedition. They started making bikes that summer. And I looked at their bike and it's like, oh, this would be a perfect bike for it. So I contacted them, asked them if they would be willing to sponsor me with a bike donation. And they were. And actually, since I had a bike shop, I could build the bike the way I wanted. So they provided me with a bike frame and a fork and a few things.
Nice. What other gear did you have?
I had the bike, I had the tent, the shovel. I didn't think that's such a big deal, but the shovel is a really big safety equipment for me. In Reach, would send out my location where I was, like every 10 minutes. In an emergency situation, I could push the SOS button and they would know where I am to come and get me. And I had normal winter camping type gear, 2 sleds I pulled behind the bike, and on the sleds, then I could take and put all my gear in there.
What was the terrain like?
Antarctica is an ice cap, and so it's basically just ice. In fact, the elevation at the South Pole is 9,300 feet above sea level. 9,000 feet of that is ice. Land is only 300 feet off of sea level, and so there's a lot of ice there. When I started out at the coast, there were some mountains that I could see, and the first few days I was going towards what they call Patriot Hills, and then after I left the Patriot Hills, till about halfway, everything's just white and nothing, and so you can't really tell if the terrain's going up or down. It just kind of looks like, you're out in the middle of this sea of ice. And in fact, a lot of times I would be going downhill and I would be looking at my GPS and getting all upset with my GPS because it was saying I was going downhill, but it felt like I was going uphill, and so it was really deceptive that way.
Could have been a weird magnetic pull because of the South Pole. What about the edge of the Earth?
You'd look off in any direction and it looked like the edge of the world was a couple hundred feet away. And if I could just make it another couple hundred feet, I'd be able to get to the edge of the world and I could just throw everything off and be done with it.
Can you tell us about the actual physical part of the expedition?
There's no way I can explain how difficult this was. Think of the hardest thing you can possibly do and do that for 40 days. Then make it twice as hard and keep going. And the reality is that is a severe understatement of how difficult it was. I knew going into this that it would be more difficult than I could possibly imagine, and it was more difficult than that.
Take us to one super hard experience.
When I started on the coast, I had to climb a pretty good hill to get up into the interior of Antarctica, and that climb, the snow was soft, it was steep enough, and the weight of all my gear, all my food and everything was heavy enough that it was extremely difficult to make it up this hill. In fact, most of the time I ended up having to get off the bike and push. I'd literally taken my chest up against the handlebars and push with everything I could to try to keep going up this hill. And while I was doing that, if I stepped on a crevasse, the snow could break out underneath me and I could fall in. And so while I was doing that, that actually happened to me. I stepped down and I was able to use my bike to pull me back up out of that and get onto some nice solid ice I could see just past it. And the interesting thing about that was right after I got that, I turned around and looked at it and took a picture, and you can see the hole I put in, and you can also see ski tracks going right by it.
What type of training did you do to prepare?
I did everything I was normally doing on a fat bike instead of on a road bike or a mountain bike. And I did that because the bike, your feet are further apart, and so a different stance, and just to make sure my body would be accustomed to that bike.
Mentally, how tough was it?
Once I decided I was going to do it, I had to have an attitude of, I'm doing this and I'm going to be successful. Been doing a lot of work trying to get sponsors, and one of the things I was doing to do that was talking about my expedition on the internet. So I talked about that a lot and was pretty open with what I was doing, and that was in an effort to try to help pay for it with sponsorship. And while I was doing that, I had a pretty famous mountain bike Hall of Fame guy who was giving me some pretty harsh criticism, and one of the things he said is that pretty arrogant of me to be saying I'm biking to the South Pole because people have tried it before and people have tried again, and that I was doing everybody a disservice by attempting to do this when I wasn't qualified to do it. And so my arrogance and stuff wasn't really, I wasn't being arrogant, I'm not an arrogant person, but I was intentionally having an attitude of I will keep going, and I had to have the attitude that no matter what I was going to keep doing. And had I not prepared myself mentally beforehand with that kind of attitude, I'm sure there were several cases along the way that it would have been, I would not have made it.
How has this trip changed your life?
You've heard that saying, you can do anything you want to. And I think this has really proved that to me, that, you can do amazing, difficult things if you just put your mind to it. And if you want it bad enough and you're willing to do the work to do it, you can do just about anything you want.
Would you do it again?
If nobody had done it yet, and I still had the opportunity to go do that and stuff, knowing what I know now, would I go do it? Yes. And I would highly recommend somebody wants to go do an expedition to the South Pole. It's an amazing place, and Antarctica is like no place else on Earth. And so, yeah, I would do it again had I not already done it.
What advice would you give to others who want to do what few others have done?
The greatest advice I'd say is go do it. The reason we can't do a lot of things is because we're not willing to make the sacrifices or make that choice to actually do it. Just about anybody that wants to could, got to figure out how to do it financially, time away from work and family. And so you can do it if you want to. It's just a matter of how badly do you want to do it. So you got something awesome you want to do, I would say, do it.
Do you plan on any other trips of this caliber?
Yeah, I can't think of anything as extreme to do as what I did. I do want to do some other things. Nothing's going to be on the same level as what I did.
What's next for you?
What I really would like to do is sell everything and move on to a sailboat, and then sell to different locations, and then do some humanitarian service at different places that I go. The problem with that is my wife doesn't want to live on a sailboat. And the thing is, when I went to Antarctica, I left in the middle of November. That meant I missed Thanksgiving, which is a big deal for my family. I missed my birthday. I missed my anniversary. I missed Christmas. I missed New Year's. I missed my son's birthday. And then I missed my wife's birthday. So my wife has put up with my expedition and with my bike store and all that went into that and everything. And so I think with the boat thing, I've got to kind of pick something that will work, and maybe I need to be a little bit more accommodating to my wife.
Mr. Burton, thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you. What a cool adventure. 2 questions for you for the comments. What do you think of Antarctica? And what do you think about the physical nature of a journey of this stature? Me, I'd love to experience Antarctica, but only for a day or two, just to see its vastness. That cold weather would be a little too extreme for me. That, the aloneness, and the strength needed to accomplish such a thing is just astonishing. I mean, how many people have really been to the South Pole? Incredible. Hit that like button, and I'd love to be a part of your journey, so subscribe. And until next time, stay badass.